In less than 72 hours, the United States Navy erased the Iranian Navy from the map. Not damaged, not pushed back, erased, warships burned at their own docks. A brand new drone carrier turned into scrap metal before it ever fired a shot. And thousands of miles away in the Indian Ocean, an Iranian frigate vanished beneath the water without a single warning. This was not a battle. It was a systematic decapitation of an entire navy. But the most shocking part of Operation Epic Fury wasn't the destruction of ships in the Persian Gulf. It was what happened 44 nautical miles off the coast of Sri Lanka, where an Iranian warship believed it was completely safe. The world woke up on February 28, 2026, to a Middle East that had fundamentally shifted overnight. For years, we watched a shadow war of drone provocations, proxy skirmishes, and tanker seizures. But the pretense of restraint finally evaporated. The White House issued a directive that left no room for ambiguity. Operation Epic Fury is approved. Total neutralization of the naval threat. In the first 12 hours alone, US and allied forces conducted over 900 joint strikes. But while the air campaign targeted command centers in Isfahan and Tehran, resulting in the reported death of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and dozens of top officials in the initial wave, the US Navy was tasked with a more specific, surgical objective: the complete and total annihilation of Iran's ability to project power at sea. To understand why this firestorm was unleashed, we have to look at the weeks leading up to the strikes. By early 2026, diplomatic channels had reached a terminal collapse. Intelligence reports indicated that Iran had successfully weaponized a new generation of long-range kamikaze naval drones, capable of striking targets as far as the Horn of Africa and the Maldives. These drones, often launched from converted merchant vessels or shadow fleet tankers, represented a direct existential threat to the global energy supply chain. Combined with a massive military buildup in the Strait of Hormuz and a zero-day window for nuclear enrichment, the tension was a powder keg. When the order came, the US Navy didn't just participate. It led a charge that rendered the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, the IRGCN, practically non-existent in less than 3 days. But before we look at the devastation in the Gulf, we have to return to that moment off the coast of Sri Lanka, the moment when an Iranian warship discovered that the war had followed it across the entire Indian Ocean. This is what military analysts are now calling the silent kill of 2026. The IRIS Dena, an Iranian Moj-class frigate, was returning home from Exercise Milan, a multilateral Indian Navy exercise involving ships from 74 nations. Its crew believed they were safe in international waters, thousands of miles from the hot zone of the Persian Gulf. Imagine standing on the bridge of that frigate after finishing naval exercises with dozens of countries. The sea is calm, the radar screens are quiet. You're thousands of miles away from the Persian Gulf and believe the war cannot reach you. And at that exact moment, deep below the surface, a submarine captain had already made his decision. On Wednesday, March 4th, the IRIS Dena was struck by a single Mark 48 heavy torpedo from the American Los Angeles-class submarine USS Charlotte, which had been stalking the frigate for over 400 miles. Submarine periscope footage, later released by the Department of Defense, showed the devastating reality of modern undersea warfare. The torpedo didn't even hit the hull. It detonated directly beneath the keel, creating a massive vacuum in the water that literally lifted the 1,500-ton vessel out of the sea before gravity snapped it in two. It sank in less than 3 minutes. This was the first sinking of an enemy warship by a US torpedo since the end of the Second World War. US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth described it as a quiet death, a statement to every Iranian captain that the ocean is no longer a hiding place. It is a trap. This onslaught sent shockwaves through the Indo-Pacific. It proved that the US Navy was willing to extend the battlefield across entire oceans to ensure that Iranian assets had no sanctuary. It wasn't just a tactical victory. It was a psychological decapitation of the Iranian naval officer corps. The realization set in. If you are flying an Iranian flag in 2026, you are a target, no matter how many thousands of miles you are from the front line. Of the 180 personnel on board, at least 87 bodies were recovered, while only 32 sailors were rescued alive by the Sri Lankan Navy. While the IRIS Dena was meeting its end in the silence of the deep, a much louder devastation was being unleashed at the Iranian naval headquarters, Bandar Abbas. For years, Iran had touted its transition toward asymmetric naval power, symbolized by the commissioning of the Shahid Bagheri. This was a massive drone carrier, a former container ship converted into a mobile base with a specialized flight deck. Alongside it sat the IRIS Makran, a 121,000-ton forward base ship, essentially a floating island of fuel, ammunition, and special forces. To the Iranian command, these were the crown jewels of their ambitions. They represented the ability to strike anywhere in the Indian Ocean without needing a traditional, expensive fleet. But on the morning of March 2nd, they became multi-billion-dollar targets. The U.S. Navy's response was a masterclass in network-centric warfare. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, like the USS Frank E. Peterson Jr., positioned hundreds of miles away in the Arabian Sea, launched coordinated salvos of Tomahawk Block 5 missiles. These missiles are designed to loiter, communicate with each other, and change targets mid-flight, making them nearly impossible for traditional point defense systems to track. But the real destruction came from the sky. US B-2 stealth bombers and carrier-based EA-18G Growlers saturated the air defenses of Bandar Abbas. They dropped 2,000-pound bunker buster penetrator bombs directly onto the wharves where the Shahid Bagheri and Makran were moored. Satellite imagery from Planet Labs showed a scene of total wreckage. The Shahid Bagheri was reduced to a burning, twisted hulk of steel at its pier. The Makran, with its massive internal fuel tanks, was struck while docked, turning the entire southern end of the naval base into a literal sea of fire. In a single hour, Iran's ability to sustain any presence in the Gulf of Oman was effectively deleted. As the firestorm raged at Bandar Abbas, the true heartbeat of the American response was pounding hundreds of miles out at sea. On the flight deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln, the air was thick with the scent of JP-5 jet fuel and the thunder of afterburners. In the pitch-black darkness of a moonless night, the deck was a choreographed chaos of yellow, green, and red shirts. One by one, F/A-18E Super Hornets were hooked into the catapults, their engines glowing orange as they reached full combat power. With a sudden, violent hiss of steam, the jets were slung into the night sky, followed closely by EA-18G Growlers. These electronic warfare specialists were the unsung heroes of the mission, flooding the Iranian radar bands with white noise and digital ghosts, blinding the S-300 and S-400 batteries before the strike packages even crossed the coast. From the Lincoln's bridge, the horizon was lit by the faint, distant flashes of interceptions and impacts, the visible pulse of a superpower at work. This carrier deck wasn't just launching aircraft, it was launching the end of Iran's navy. But then, something unexpected happened. As the smoke cleared over Bandar Abbas, the remnants of the IRGCN attempted to activate their famous swarm strategy. For decades, Iranian naval doctrine relied on the idea that they could overwhelm American destroyers by deploying hundreds of fast-attack Boghamar craft, armed with machine guns, sea mines, and rocket-propelled grenades. They believed that even the most advanced Aegis destroyer could only track and engage so many targets at once before being physically swarmed and boarded. In 2026, however, the US Navy flipped the script. They didn't send in the destroyers. They sent in the ghost fleets. These are unmanned surface vessels, USVs, autonomous, high-speed boats equipped with AI-targeted 30mm cannons and Hellfire missiles. Instead of risking a multi-billion-dollar ship and 300 sailors in the shallow, treacherous waters of the Strait of Hormuz. The Navy used these expendable drones to pick apart the Iranian swarms from a distance. Every time an Iranian boat activated its radar to find a target, or keyed its radio to coordinate a maneuver, an autonomous sensor fusion network tagged its location. US sailors, sitting in air-conditioned control rooms in Bahrain or even back in Virginia, remotely neutralized the threats using high-definition feeds. By March 6th, CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper reported that over 60 Iranian fast-attack craft had been hit or sunk. The swarm didn't even get close enough to see the hull of an American carrier. It was a digital slaughter, a cold, calculated demonstration that mass no longer beats precision when the precision is autonomous and tireless. But why did the US Navy unleash this level of shockwave now? What was the this that happened afterward? The answer lies in a shocking reversal of the drone war. For years, Iran's Shahed 136 kamikaze drones were the terror of battlefields across the Middle East and Europe. They were cheap, effective, and hard to stop. In Operation Epic Fury, the Pentagon decided to give Iran a taste of its own medicine. For the first time, the US military deployed the Lucas, the low-cost, uncrewed combat attack system. These are $35,000 reverse-engineered versions of the very drones Iran pioneered, but with American-grade guidance systems. By the thousands, these American-made kamikaze drones swarmed over Iranian missile cities, those infamous underground complexes carved into the coastal mountains. The strategy was brilliant. Use the cheap drones to force the Iranian air defenses to use up their expensive, limited supply of surface-to-air missiles. Once the radars were saturated and the missile batteries were empty, the heavy bombers moved in to finish the job. This asymmetric reversal has turned Iran's greatest strength, its drone and missile stockpiles, into its greatest liability. They were beaten at their own game with their own tactics, at a scale they never imagined possible. The hunter became the hunted, and the drone king of the Middle East found its kingdom burning from the very weapons it helped popularize. The "this happened" part of the story, however, isn't just about military victory. It's about the catastrophic global fallout. In a desperate attempt to retaliate, the remnants of the IRGC have effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz. They didn't do it with ships. Those were already gone. They did it with a massive, indiscriminate sea mining campaign using primitive, tethered mines dropped from civilian dhows and fishing boats. The result has been a total freeze of global energy markets. As of today, March 7th, 2026, maritime traffic through the strait has dropped to near zero. Shipping giants like Maersk, MSC, and Hapag-Lloyd have officially suspended all transits, rerouting their fleets around the Cape of Good Hope. The International Maritime Organization reports that over 3,000 vessels are currently stranded, and the global supply chain is in a terminal tailspin. Crude oil prices, which were sitting at $79 a barrel in late February, exploded past the $100 mark in a matter of days. For the average person, this onslaught in the Persian Gulf means an immediate and painful spike in gas prices and a fresh wave of global inflation. This is the hidden, dark cost of naval warfare. When a regional power's navy is destroyed, the vacuum it leaves behind is filled with chaos. The Strait of Hormuz is the world's most vital choke point, and with it closed, the world's economy is gasping for air. It is a stark reminder that the ocean isn't just a battlefield, it is a global highway. When that highway is blocked, every person on the planet pays the price. But the most significant "then this happened" is the internal collapse of the Iranian regime. For decades, the Islamic Republic maintained its social contract by promising stability and resistance against the Great Satan. But as the Tomahawks fell and the Navy vanished, that contract was torn to shreds. Massive protests, which had been simmering since early 2026 over economic mismanagement and brutal suppression, turned into a full-blown revolution. The Iranian people, seeing their military's elite units neutralized in a matter of days, realized the impenetrable regime was actually a house of cards. Reports are now emerging of widespread defections within the regular Iranian army, as soldiers refuse to fire on their own citizens to protect a command structure that is already effectively dead. The security apparatus that kept the regime in power for nearly 50 years is failing, not because it was invaded, but because it was proved to be powerless to protect its own borders. One of the most intense duels of the war took place around the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier strike group. In a final, desperate act, the IRGC launched a barrage of what they claimed were hypersonic anti-ship missiles. Iranian state media immediately broadcast that they had struck and sunk the carrier, showing grainy, faked footage of an explosion at sea. But hours later, CENTCOM released high-definition footage from the Lincoln's own deck. It showed the Aegis defense system, specifically the new directed energy laser weapons and RIM-174 missiles, intercepting every single threat with a 100% success rate. The hypersonic myth was shattered in a single night. The carrier wasn't just safe, it was launching a fresh wave of strikes as the Iranian propaganda machines were still claiming victory. It was a humiliating moment for the regime, proving that their most advanced wonder weapons were no match for American electronic warfare and directed energy. But let's go back to the human element. The quiet death of the IRIS Dena off Sri Lanka remains the defining image of this war. Over 100 Iranian sailors, many of whom were young conscripts, were lost in a conflict they didn't start, in a place they thought was safe. The Sri Lankan Navy, acting as first responders, found only traces of oil and a few survivors clinging to debris in the vast Indian Ocean. It was a heart-wrenching reminder that in the 21st century, war doesn't happen on a front line. It happens everywhere, all at once. If you are part of the security apparatus of a hostile regime, there is no distance, no international water, and no amount of ocean that can protect you. Operation Epic Fury has proven that the US Navy has transitioned into a new era of persistent dominance. This isn't just about having the biggest ships, it's about having the most integrated, autonomous network. The use of unmanned surface vessels, cheap kamikaze drones, and undersea stealth has rendered the traditional asymmetric threats of mid-tier powers like Iran practically obsolete. If you challenge the freedom of navigation in 2026, you aren't starting a fight. You are inviting a level of destruction that your entire national infrastructure cannot survive. The message is clear to every other regional power watching from the sidelines. The rules of the ocean have changed. Brute force and massed numbers are no longer enough to stop a superpower that can see everything and strike from anywhere. The firestorm unleashed in the Persian Gulf was a demonstration of a new kind of war. A war where the machine is as deadly as the man, and where the code is as powerful as the cannon. History will remember March 2026 as the month the giant finally lost its patience. The US Navy didn't just strike Iran, it dismantled the very idea of Iranian naval power. The devastation unleashed in Bandar Abbas and the quiet death in the Indian Ocean are the new reality of modern conflict. It is a world where being out of sight no longer means being out of range, and where the machine is as deadly as the man behind it. The Ghost and the Machine have won the first round. As the smoke clears over the Gulf of Oman, the map of the Middle East is being redrawn. The Strait of Hormuz may be closed for now, but the regime that threatened to shut it forever is finding that the firestorm they invited has finally come home to roost. The question now isn't whether Iran can win. That's already been answered. The question is, what comes after the collapse? The world is watching, waiting to see how this conflict ends. Will it lead to a new era of stability in the Middle East? Or is this just the beginning of a larger, even more dangerous confrontation? The answer lies in the hands of the leaders who must now navigate the wreckage of a fallen navy and a broken regime. As we move forward, one thing is certain: the ocean will never be the same again. What do you think? Was this level of firepower a necessary deterrent to save the global economy? Or has the world entered a cold quagmire that will haunt us for the next generation? And with the Strait of Hormuz a war zone, how will you adapt to a world where the old rules of energy and trade no longer exist? Let the discussion begin in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, remember to subscribe. We'll see you on the next video.